It's funny how one little word, possession, can just um, open up so much, especially in relationships. My first thought is always something a bit, well, possessive, negative maybe. But digging deeper, it really sparks a whole conversation about, feelings, expectations, what we actually value.
Absolutely. And that's exactly why we wanted to tackle this today. We're diving into Suso Ho, that's the Vietnamese term they use, specifically how it plays out in romantic relationships. Our main source here is this really fascinating discussion on Viet Cetera's YouTube channel. It's between Thuy Minh and Bins.
Yeah, they really covered a lot of ground, looking at Susoho from all these different angles. So our mission today really is to kind of follow that thread, to get past the simple definition of possession and love, and explore the psychology, the social stuff, the personal feelings involved. We really want you, our listener, to walk away with a, let's say, a richer, more nuanced view of it all.
Okay, so let's dive right in. When you first heard them discussing Suso Ho, that word possession, what immediately popped into your head?
Honestly, something slightly negative, like images of control, maybe not seeing your partner as, their own person, that kind of thing.
That's super common, yeah. But what was great was how they immediately started to broaden it out. Binns brought up Yuval Noah Harari, Homo sapiens, and this basic human thing about needing to own and control resources just to survive. Land, food, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Makes you think, doesn't it?
Right.
How does that fundamental need bleed into our relationships?
Right. It feels so primal, this idea of staking a claim. And then they did that flip, talking about how wheat basically domesticated us through farming. That really throws a wrench in the whole who controls who idea.
It really does. It shows how the things we think we own can actually end up shaping us, our lives, even who we are, which then kind of led into this other idea about possession being a way to signal status, success, without having to spell it out.
Oh, definitely. Like the car you have or the clothes you wear. It's almost like a visual shortcut, isn't it? Your stuff tells a story about you, about your achievements, without you saying a thing.
Exactly, like an unspoken biography written in belongings. But, and this was a sharp point they made, sometimes not showing off possessions says something else entirely. Maybe confidence, wisdom. It flips the expectation.
Yeah, it makes you question the why behind what we display.
Yeah.
And then, after all that sort of practical talk, they jumped into love, which felt a bit weird after that joke about not loving is the greatest wisdom. Why talk about something so messy and potentially painful?
Well, isn't that just human nature? We want things simple, logical, but we're always drawn to the complicated, emotional stuff. And that's where Susaho in romance gets really interesting. That analogy they used, the partner being like a race paddy, something other people see and judge you by in a way, that really stuck with me.
Oh, totally. The partner is the ultimate ornament, a reflection of your status. This is a bit awkward to admit, but yeah, that dynamic exists. Choosing someone for how they look on your arm, not necessarily for the deep connection, that cold-headed thing they talked about.
And what's interesting is how, frankly, they discussed those, let's say, less romantic reasons. The idea that maybe love isn't number one for everyone, maybe career or friends come first at certain times, and how that order can change. Ben's talking about focusing on career first, but maybe now shifting priorities towards love. That felt very real.
And that common idea, maybe even an assumption, that having huge career success and a genuinely happy family life at the same time is like incredibly hard to pull off. The image of the successful man with a happy family is the peak achievement. It's such a strong cultural story.
Yeah, it speaks to the trade-offs we feel we have to make. But then the conversation shifted again, didn't it? Towards something more personal. Less about transactions, connecting possession to just like basic desires and what we happen to like.
Like wanting a specific vintage jacket or a musician feeling that connection to one particular guitar. Eric Clapton's, for instance. It's almost like being a kid again, right? Just wanting something because it catches your eye, because it appeals to you.
Yeah, that initial sparkle you get from something new, and then that weird psychological twist where you want something more the moment it's hard to get or gone completely. That's a classic thing. Scarcity, increasing desire. Definitely plays out in relationships.
Which brought them to that really interesting question. Does this whole possession thing in relationships start with women? This idea that men are out there chasing status, chasing stuff, basically to get women's attention.
That dynamic where women are seen as picking partners from a pool of successful men, they called it an interesting game, where maybe the first hook is the status, the possessions, and the deeper connection comes, or maybe doesn't come later.
It's one way of looking at it, for sure. And it was good they brought in the counterpoint from nature, right? Male animals with their big displays to attract a mate, it kind of reminds you that some of these attraction patterns might go way, way back evolutionary roots.
Exactly. It's important to see it through different lenses. And
Mm.
then they touched on the societal expectations, specifically on women, like the example of needing to know how to cook as a metaphor for being a good catch. It just highlights the different pressures, the different historical roles we've all had to navigate.
And that distinction they made, possessing something for yourself
Mhm.
versus possessing it for how others see you, like being in a relationship just because it helps your career or something, makes you doubt how real that connection is.
Which leads straight into defining good versus bad possession in love, right?
Uh-huh.
The idea that feeling possessive can actually make you want to protect someone, care for them because they're yours.
Yeah, that positive sense of mine, not controlling, but intimate. Knowing a part of them no one else does, that private feeling behind saying, you are mine, just between the two of you.
But, crucially, it turns negative when it becomes about control, or when you broadcast it possessively in public. Big difference between cherishing a love you both feel you've earned and just wanting to own someone for show.
It really highlights that split between our public image and the private safe space in a relationship, and how possession works differently in each.
Mm.
I imagine it must be tough for partners of famous people dealing with the public image, the history.
And that was such an insightful point about using art like music to process those really complex feelings respectfully, not direct confrontation. The idea of a song like Cho Min M, for myself, for you, dedicating something intensely personal but sharing it widely, that's a really elegant way to handle that private-public tension.
It really shows the thought behind sharing something so personal. And then inside that safe space, that idea of deliberately not talking about work, but focusing on the future, passions, what you've learned from the past, it really speaks to setting boundaries and nurturing the connection itself.
Then they shifted to something more abstract, possessing an idea. You know that buzz when you think of something new, and then immediately you have to check if anyone else thought of it first.
Huh, yeah. And the different ways you can feel like you own it, writing a book, making a podcast, putting on an exhibition, or even just feeling like you own it spiritually, inside yourself. It definitely broadens the meaning of possession.
Which connects to effort, right?
Yeah.
Sacrifice.
Yeah.
Feeling like you own something because of the work you put in. But they made a good distinction. A creator might finish a project, but possession in a relationship is ongoing. It's tied up with responsibility.
And thinking about how those responsibilities have changed. Historically, man is provider, woman is caregiver. Versus now, where independence is often prized, it makes you question, what's the basis for commitment if it's not those old roles?
What's the currency of love now? Maybe it's the ability to bring happiness. Or even, and this is a bit dark, the idea that causing pain can be a weird kind of value, a sign of deep connection. But ultimately, the happiness has to outweigh the pain, right? And that really interesting idea of being grateful for past pain, owning the experience because it makes future happiness possible.
That's a really profound perspective. It makes you think about the chase for enough. When it comes to wanting things or security, is there ever really an endpoint?
Contrasting that with finding satisfaction, finding possession in things that do have an end, like finding peace of mind. Maybe the best kinds of possession aren't the ones we chase forever.
So when it came down to it, how possessive did they feel they were personally in their own relationships? It sounded like maybe not very, like focus more on the private connection, the mutual responsibility.
Yeah, and deliberately avoiding the big public displays. Less social media drama, less constant checking in. It suggested a preference for something more internal, less performative.
Which just hammers home how important it is that both people in the relationship are on the same page about what possession means to them. It can't just be one person's definition.
They even framed it positively at one point, possession as boldness, courage, being confident enough to claim the relationship. And that lovely idea of feeling someone's presence even when they aren't there as a sign of that deep, confident bond.
Which, of course, leads to the fact that relationships change. The way you possess each other changes. Some things fade, new things start. It's dynamic, not static.
And I thought reframing possession as the effort, the work you put in, that was really key. It moves it away from control and towards care, towards contribution.
But, here's the tricky part. How do you know if your efforts are genuinely about making your partner happy versus just your own selfish need to possess or control? That line can be really blurry sometimes.
And we're back to mutual consent, aren't we? That seems fundamental for defining healthy possession. It needs that open talk, shared boundaries.
And it's hard, isn't it? to be sure the other person really gets and values the effort behind your version of possession.
Yeah.
It's not always simple cause and effect.
Right. Acknowledging that possession and love isn't one thing. Sometimes it feels good and secure. Sometimes it feels selfish or anxious. Finding that balance is like a constant negotiation, needs awareness, needs communication.
And then that final metaphor they dropped, the title deed, the sodang,
Mm.
applying that very concrete symbol of ownership to something as fluid and emotional as love.
Wow. Which set up that incredibly powerful moment near the end. It felt totally unplanned.
Yeah. Bin's reading from that letter, it felt so raw, so real. Like the perfect unscripted wrap up to everything. Okay, let me try and capture this. He said, when you love too much, you don't need to hold back anything for yourself, only to end up regretting it more, only to erase things later, because it's already up there. Afterwards, nobody dares to fall, dares to immerse themselves in love for fear of pain. Yet you and I still stubbornly, still love each other passionately, because I know you will respond with the utmost sincerity. Why be afraid to fall in love if trading 10 times the pain for one beautiful moment like this? I apologize. I love you.
Wow, that hits hard, doesn't it? The sheer vulnerability there, the emotion, it pulls together everything we've been talking about regarding Sushal.
It really does. It felt like such an authentic, almost accidental conclusion to this whole exploration. It just perfectly captured that complex, messy, beautiful contradiction of possession in our closest ties, reflecting all those different viewpoints we touched on.
It really underscores how deeply personal all this is. And maybe as we wrap up, that's the main thing for you, our listener, to think about. What does possession mean in your relationships? How do you experience it?
So maybe the final thought to leave you with is this: that title deed for love. Is it something you earn through sheer effort? Is it about mutual agreement? Or, like that letter suggests, is it about being brave enough to embrace it, all the amazing highs and the potential lows that come with really, truly loving someone?
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Silisho. We hope it gave you some things to think about, and we're looking forward to exploring more relationship complexities with you next time.